All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Geekdom Report here at Geekdom Central. Today we're going to be talking about House of the Dragon, episode 5. We're making our way. We're halfway through the season now, and I don't think today's episode will be a super long one. There's the gist is actually I just really like the episode, but there wasn't a lot of particulars that I think we'll get into. But who knows? I might end up rambling for a while. It could happen. We'll see. And I don't think we're going to get into spoilers today. But if we do, I'll be sure to comment on that. So with that, let's get into it. So I just have a couple notes here. So like always, I mean, everyone's killing it as far as the actors go. Everyone just continues to bring their A game. But Emily Carey, who plays Alicent, was phenomenal this episode. She has a really great scene with S1E5, and I'm sure I said that wrong again, who plays her dad, Otto Hightower. They have a really great scene earlier on in the episode with some good dialogue where he's really good in it. But then later in the episode, there's some stuff. She makes some statements, we'll say, and she just did an incredible job. She is, I liked her from the beginning, but with each episode, as her character's given a bit more, she's just really showcasing her acting ability and how great that she's doing, and I'm really enjoying her, and especially what she did this episode. She has some great dialogue, some great facial performance. She was terrific this episode. Also, in addition to Paddy Considine and Millie Alcock, I've praised them every episode, and I'll probably continue to praise them in every episode that they're in because they're just terrific. Millie Alcock got to do some fun, kind of snarky stuff this episode, which I enjoyed. I thought she did that really well, and Paddy Considine, as always, he's amazing. I am loving him so much in this show, and I mean, obviously he's not an unpopular person. He's been in quite a few things, but I'm really hoping that this will like be a major shot in the arm for his career, and that he'll be able to get even more opportunities because he's killing it. He's doing a really amazing job. But Matt Smith, especially this episode, he's not in it for too long, and again, he's been great the whole time, but he got some really fun I'm just laughing at some of the lines that he has. He got some really fun scenes with some really fun dialogue, and this episode in particular, I felt like he did really amazing with Aegon, or not Aegon, oh my gosh, Daemon's swagger and his, just kind of, I don't know, swagger's the right word, and I thought he nailed it. He was so good. Everyone was really good this episode, but the main cast, I guess, so far is getting a specific shout out because they were excellent. We got some really great. The other two kind of main points that I have taken down in my notes here are, I told you this will probably be a short episode, but we got some really good kind of classic, how I wrote it in my notes is Game of Thrones shenanigans. And by that, I mean the sort of intrigue, political, backstabbing, scheming, telling people things that they're not necessarily supposed to know, all of that kind of stuff. We got some really good stuff from that with this episode. In particular, there's a conversation between Larys Clubfoot and Alicent that I thought, that's actually when I wrote this down, where it's like that's like some prime Game of Thrones stuff right there. And that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. And it's not easy to do political intrigue, especially in this case where early Game of Thrones was adopted, in some cases literally word for word from the books. So George was the one that came up with all of that. Whereas here, they're kind of given, if you read Fire and Blood, you're more or less given like the cliff notes. If you read A World of Ice and Fire, that's more like bullet points, so that's even more high level and summarized. reading Fire and Blood, I would say that that's more like the Cliff Notes, where there is more detail there, but it's still a very condensed and shortened version of the story. So these showrunners and these writers have to come up with really interesting, convincing, and compelling ways to make these Cliff Notes happen. And so there are political divides and, well, the big one being the divide between Alicent and Rhaenyra, which is the entire crux of the Dance of the Dragons. And while they have the general idea, they still have to come up with compelling ways to make that interesting and to flesh it out for an entire season and all of that. So far, I feel like they're doing a really great job. I believe that I mentioned this in my review of the last episode, but at the beginning of the show, it felt like they were going to take a very pro-Rhaenyra approach and sort of make it seem like you're supposed to root for her and then kind of make Alicent the bad guy and the opposing side. Excuse me. And I feel like they're continuing now to... It felt like maybe they kind of did Rhaenyra for the first couple episodes, showing her side and her story, and now they're in the Alicent section, where they're trying to kind of explain her side, her motivations, why we should consider voting for her. Not voting, but you get what I mean. And in addition to Emily Carey, I had to look and make sure I said her name correctly, because there's some of the actors that I haven't memorized their names yet, but she's just terrific. And I love Olivia Cooke, who is going to be playing the adult/future version of Alicent, but Emily Carey is doing a just phenomenal job so far. And initially, Rhaenyra was the main one that I was going to be sad when we lost Millie Alcock playing the younger version, but now I'm also going to be really sad to lose Emily Carey, because she's doing an amazing job. And I felt like she especially has been able to deliver a lot through her face. She does terrific deliveries of her lines, of course, but she has been able to showcase some really great facial emotional acting, specifically in this episode, and I'm really loving that. And just seeing what she's doing with the character, it's really wonderful. And just as a side note, I saw a little clip on YouTube the other day of her. It was her and the actor who plays Kristen Cole, and they were doing some press junket, whatever they were doing, and they were given words or names or stuff like that from the Song of Ice and Fire, and they had to try and spell them. And so she did one where the word that he gave her was Jaehaerys, and so it was just really funny to see her try and do that. And one of the things that she actually mentioned that I really liked was that she mentioned she recognized the name because she said that Alicent spent a lot of time reading to the old King Jaehaerys, and she said that she knew that from the research that she did for the character. And it always just makes me happy when actors take this kind of thing kind of seriously and actually delve into the lore and the backstory and the character, because I think at a high level, as long as they are given correct instruction on the character's motivations and who the character is, then they can still put on a really good performance that honors the character. But it always just, as a big nerd, it just makes me happy to see actors and actresses who are willing to actually kind of do the legwork and get invested in this world and learn more about it. And so it just made me happy when she said that in the little interview that they were doing, that she mentioned that she kind of read up on it. I was like, you know what? That's awesome. So anyways, moving on to my final point is something I kind of already mentioned a little bit, but this episode also set up a lot between the conflict of Alicent and Rhaenyra. They've had some kind of disagreements before in prior episodes, obviously, but I felt like this episode in particular was dealt a massive blow to their relationship and put a really big crack in that foundation. And I really liked that because I think it's compelling. I think they're doing a good job at making this interesting, but it's also good to it makes me really happy that they are doing the work in these, I don't know if you'd call this first half of the season flashback, since it's the younger versions of the characters, but if it's been going on for 5 episodes, I think that's a little too extensive to be called a flashback. But this is not where the main Dance of the Dragons takes place. It takes place when they're older. But it makes me really happy that they're taking the time to lay kind of this prologue, precursor groundwork to what comes later. Because they easily could have just started with the older versions of the characters and then either through flashbacks or just through dialogue kind of explained all of this stuff that happened before. And if that had been done well, it might have been kind of effective. But the fact that they actually are taking at least half a season, if not more, and I believe that the next episode, at least part of it, is still going to be these older or the younger versions of the characters. So they're taking their time to set this up, and I really, really like that, because I think it's laying a good foundation for when the dance actually happens, especially because it seems like they're taking the time to do it for both characters, for Rhaenyra and for Alicent. And that's kind of the whole point of the Dance of the Dragons, is that there's not any one person that's right. They both have, I don't know if I want to say they both have valid claims to the throne, but you can understand why they both feel like the throne is theirs, or that it should belong to their children. And that is what makes this compelling to me. If it was just a story about someone who shouldn't have the throne and they came in and took it, and then it was about, so like if Alicent came in and just stole the throne, and then Rhaenyra, and Alicent's cackling evilly while twirling her theoretical mustache and saying, ha ha ha, the throne is mine, and Rhaenyra has to come in and say, no, the throne belongs to me, that was really dorky, I'm sorry, but that's just not as interesting to me, because that's a pretty bog standard story and a way to tell it. But the fact that they are doing enough, I feel like they're doing enough to justify both of these characters to an extent, I really, really like that, and I'm happy that that's the route that they're going, and that's what we're getting. So the one last thing that I'm going to keep this high level because I don't want to get too into the spoilers, but the last section of this episode takes place at a party, and this party stressed me out, and I mean that in the best way possible, because there is kind of those the Game of Thrones political intrigue shenanigans that I mentioned before. There's some of that going on at this dance, but it's not just between specific characters, it's between lots of different pairs of characters and things. And so to have it just continually flipping back and forth between all these different things that are happening, and then these two characters are in a conflict, and then this character comes over and is doing something with this one over here, and it's just it keeps building and building and building, and you're just like, oh, what is going on? It's so, I felt like that was really well done, that it's this event that's supposed to be happy, and for a lot of the people that are in that room at the party, they are happy because they don't know what's going on. But then as you're flashing back and forth between these different sets of characters and seeing what's going on with them, and who knows about whose secret, and who's going to do what to who about this, and just all these things that are happening, and it just keeps building. And I really, really liked how that went down, and it was really good, and I was really, really liked that part of the episode. I thought it was really well done. So I think that's it for the most part. There wasn't anything that stuck out to me in particular that I didn't like. I think about it, and there is one thing that happens towards the end, and that involves a spoiler, and I think it's kind of silly to talk about spoilers for one thing. So there is one thing that happened at the end of the episode that I thought was a little, now why would it happen like that? And so I don't know how I feel about that. But other than that, I thought it was a really solid episode. All the great stuff that I mentioned before. And it's one thing I can say about this show so far is that there has not been a single episode that hasn't kept me entertained. I've been entertained throughout the 5 episodes so far. And I feel like for the most part, they all have really great pacing. I think they've all been longer than an hour. And there's always the concern that some of them might get bogged down or have bad pacing in certain parts. And I don't think every episode has been flawless in terms of pacing, but for the most part, I haven't had any problems with it. Each episode has continually moved at a fairly brisk pace and kept you engaged and kept things interesting, and for me at least. So I'm definitely really enjoying where the show is going so far, and I'm really looking forward to keep going. I believe I've said that at the end of every review so far, but it's true. I was definitely nervous when they announced that they were doing House of the Dragon at the very beginning. When we kept getting to the lead up, I was nervous. When they were releasing behind the scenes pictures and stuff, I was getting nervous, especially because in the still shots, that's when the wigs look pretty bad. But, and I've mentioned this before too, I think most of them look really good. The only one this episode that I thought looked a little silly was Laenor's. The hair seemed too big for his head, kind of like the issue I mentioned with Lena's a couple episodes ago when she was younger, because they're older now, and so her wig for the older actress actually looks pretty okay. Like I thought it definitely fit her better than it did the wig that they had for the younger version of her character. But Laenor's, his hair looks too big for his head, and I don't know if that fully explains it, but that's the best way I can think of to explain it. And so it kind of looks fake, and not just because it's white, but because it like goes out in front, so it makes it seem like his face is way far back and then comes up and goes back, and it looks a little silly to me. But again, I feel like that's a pretty minor complaint, especially because he's not a major character. If it was someone like Viserys or Rhaenyra and their wig looked comically bad and they're like the main character that's in everything, that would have been a bit worse, I think. But with Laenor, I think that it's not too big of an issue. So anyways, that is our review of episode 5, halfway through the season. Really enjoying it so far and looking forward to reviewing the next episode next week. See you guys.